Hi, I'm Linda Augsburg, Editorial Content Chief for American Patchwork and Quilting, and I'm so excited to share the news that we have added a pillowcase dress pattern to the free patterns on the 1 Million Pillowcase Challenge website. That website is allpeoplequilt.com/million pillowcases, and you'll find this pattern on the website, and now you can add your pillowcase dresses to the tally for the Million Pillowcase Challenge. So what you need to make a pillowcase dress is 7/8 of a yard of fabric for the body, 3/8 of a yard of fabric for the band. You'll also need 2 pieces of ribbon, and those are 40 inches each, so 80 inches of ribbon total. You'll also need some tools that are not common to quilting. You'll need a seam gauge that'll help you turn the casings back. You'll need a marker, and typically I use a wash away marking tool for fabric, and then you'll also need a safety pin to run the ribbon through the casing. And those are just some things you want to make sure you have on hand because they're going to make the rest of this really much easier. So you need to cut your band 10 inches by 41 inches, and you need to cut the body at 26.5 by 41 inches. Then you're going to layer the fabrics, laying your band piece on the table right side up, laying your body piece over that band, also right side up, and then we're going to fold that fabric up under the table about 1/3 of the way up, and then roll it in a small roll. And this is just like we do a regular roll it up pillowcase, because really that's how you're starting. You're going to bring that band up and over, and then you're going to straighten those edges up and pin along those edges. Make sure when you're pinning that you keep that roll of fabric well outside of where you're going to have your seam allowance. I like to put my pins so that the heads are facing out and the pins are perpendicular to the seam line. That way, as I come toward a pin with the sewing machine, I can easily pull it out with my right hand while keeping everything aligned as I go forward. So I'm going to sew this seam with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Again, just making sure that before I sew over my pins, I pull them out, and keeping my hand, I like to run my hand right along that roll of the body so that I can make sure that I don't accidentally catch that pillowcase body, or in this case dress body, in the seam. So next, what you're going to do, now that we've got that seam sewn, we're going to turn out the band, kind of like pulling the sleeve out of a sweater. And we're going to tug on that body roll and pull it out. And I just, every once in a while, if you reposition, holding on to the band and the body at this end and pulling out, you'll unfurl the whole body of the dress. The next step is to press that band away from the body. So you want to press from both sides to make sure you've got a nice crisp edge. And then you're going to match your fabric edges up. And you're going to do this wrong sides together, because I'm going to show you how to make a French seam, which is going to be in the center of the back. Again, a French seam will encase that seam allowance to make this dress as sturdy and resistant to fraying as possible. So I'm going to use a leader strip, which is a little piece of fabric that I'm going to put under my presser foot to start sewing on. I'm just going to sew along that, and it'll help to keep the thread lifted out of the needle area so that when I sew onto my pillowcase cuff, my pillowcase body, I have a cleaner start. And again, I'm using a 1/4 inch scant seam allowance. So I've put my 1/4 inch foot on, but I am sewing without the fabric touching the bar of that 1/4 inch foot. And the reason I'm doing that as a French seam is because I'm going to turn this the other way around in the next step. And then that seam allowance, this seam allowance that I'm sewing now at the scant 1/4 inch, will be encased in that seam. So now that I've sewn that side seam, I'm going to turn the whole piece so that the body is wrong side out. And there's that seam. You can see it's really clean, but of course this is the wrong side of the fabric. So what I'm going to do next is press that seam so that the sewn seam is right on the edge. Now you'll want to make sure you're keeping the fabric fold right up against the edge of your 1/4 inch foot so that you're taking more of a seam allowance than you did the first time, so that you can be sure to catch that entire first seam allowance of the French seam in this second seam. So now you can see we've got that side seam sewn and all of that seam allowance is encased. You may have some random threads, just trim those off, but otherwise your pillowcase dress now has its side seam. Now we're going to press that side seam flat. Again, since it's all one seam allowance, you just need to pick a direction. And then we're going to center that in the center back of the dress. So now that I've centered that French seam in the center of the back of the dress, I'm going to fold the dress in half so that seam and the center front are aligned on this side and the 2 folds of fabric are on this side. And I'm going to cut the armholes. To cut the armholes, I'm going to use my marking pen and my ruler. I'm going to measure 2 inches from the edge, that double fold edge, and make a mark. And then I'm going to measure 4 inches from the top raw edges and make a mark. Then I'm going to connect those marks. I want to have the top edge straight, so it's going to be like a reverse J. I want to make sure that I've got a good straight edge of at least 2 inches, 2.5 inches actually, because that's where my casing is going to be. Then I'm going to curve that J shape from the side. Then I'm going to take my scissors and cut through all 4 layers of fabric around that curve and straight over. And that gives me those 2 armholes. So now I'm going to turn that armhole edge under. So I'm going to turn this edge to the wrong side under 1/4 inch. Again, I've got my small little seam gauge that lets me make sure I've got a nice good 1/4 inch. Once you've done the entire armhole at 1/4 inch, you're going to roll it a second time at 1/4 inch again. So that's going to finish that armhole edge right off with a fold. So again, that seam allowance is enclosed. So now you can see I've folded that edge under twice and pressed it well. Again, it's a little more difficult to get that curve because it's a curved edge you're trying to fold up against. So you want to make sure as you're sewing that you're sewing slow. Again, I'm starting with my leader, which I'll trim off. And then I just want to top stitch along that open fold. So right along this fold through the top. And I want to stop and reposition my curved edge especially every so often so that that seam is as smooth as possible with no puckers, as it's very easy when you're going around that curve to get occasional puckers in that seam. So you just want to take special care to fold that over, stop and reposition if you need to, so that sewn under or turned under edge is as smooth as possible. Now, to make the casing at the front and the back of the dress, you're going to turn under 1/4 inch on that straight top edge, and then press that all the way across. Then you're going to turn under 1¼ inches. Again, just making sure with your seam gauge, and press that again. And that'll form the casing. Then we'll go and sew that casing edge down. So you can see the top stitching we did along that folded edge on the front and on the back, and that just holds the casing in place. Next, we're going to use our big safety pin and our 2 40-inch pieces of ribbon. And we're just going to slide that safety pin through the casing with the ribbon attached. And that safety pin just gives you a little something to hold on to as you're sliding the ribbon through. You can see I'm just pushing it through. The safety pin's solid, so it goes through easier, and then the ribbon follows. I'm going to go all the way across the front casing with one 40-inch piece of ribbon and pull it through. So once you've run the ribbon through the front casing and the back casing, you'll tie or tie a bow to join those ribbons for shoulder straps, and your pillowcase dress is complete. Be sure to go to allpeoplequilt.com/millionpillowcases for the pattern for this, and also to record any pillowcase dresses that you donate to a charity. Thank you so much for sewing with us.